Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. It's great to be with you today. A lot of really good stuff coming up. Don't forget, I'll be at the Combine all next week doing my podcast. Really, Tuesday through Saturday's podcast, maybe even Sundays. Next week will all be coming to you. We're going to have tons of video that you're going to get to see with interviews with all of the top prospects that you can think of. We're going to be there. We're going to have a massive team of 5 reporters there with us interviewing. We're going to have interviews with Pete Carroll. We'll have interviews with John Spytek. We're going to have interviews with lots of people, both Raiders and then uh, uh, potential draft picks. It's just going to be a bevy of information. So get your popcorn ready, in the words of Terrell Owens, because it's going to be a massive week next week from Indianapolis. Today, we're going to be answering some of your emails and questions, and got a lot of really good ones. Some of them I thought were very interesting. So remember, if you ever want an email answered, you can email me at Spartan Nation Mail, MAIL at yahoo.com. Spartan Nation Mail at yahoo.com. You must put in the subject line Raiders Q&A. You must include at least your name and your last name initial. Now, some people like to put Raider Giraffe or what. That doesn't count. Got to have your first name and your last initial. Now, only email me once per week. Once. If it's more than that, it gets labeled spam and then you never get back into the queue again. Don't go more than once in 1 week, but get those out to us. Now, what we do is we have a staff that reads them. Then, if there's a theme that seems to be generated throughout multiple emails, we like to go with those first because we get to answer the most questions. Sometimes, though, it'll just be one if it's really unique, and love to get those. But a lot of people send emails and they're more of just making a statement. And that's not really what this is about. This is about questions. So if you have questions, great. Statements, I mean, they'll get read by somebody, but they don't usually make it on air. So there you go. This next one comes us from Adrian from Peoria, Illinois. Listening to your mock draft podcast, I had to disagree with you. I don't think you ever draft a running back in the first anymore. Those days are long gone. To me, the only position you draft in the first is quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, corner, or pass rusher. I personally would draft Will Johnson in the first with the 6th pick. I agree with you about the 2nd-round pick, and I would draft Dylan Sampson in the 3rd along with DT. I would take Elgersma in the 4th or 5th. That's the quarterback out of Canada. I would not take him there. While signing Fields for a cheaper QB option, that's assuming QB that Fields is going to be available. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to return to Pittsburgh, so that's not an option. Along with trading. Uh, Thanks for your time. Again, now I just tell you, don't send us one that's an opinion and somehow that got past the screeners. I'll deal with them. I'm going to never mind. Here's a note here of why they wanted me to address it. It wasn't my opinion on quarterback changing. I'm running back changing. It's the opinion of the NFL. Multiple people in the NFL feel like, especially when you look at Saquon Barkley, but even the way Josh Jacobs played last year, that there is a resurgence to picking if they're an elite running back in the first round, then you got him for 5 years, then you let him move on. The consensus is still there pretty strong that you don't pay him the massive second contract, but there is a pendulum switch in the NFL going back to drafting those guys in the first round, running backs, if they're elite. And there are 2 that are considered by everybody I talk to. There are a couple that name a third, but for the most part, everybody I talk to has 2 running backs that they think are elite first round talents. And one of them is Ashton Genty, which everybody thinks is one. I've not had one person tell me that they think Omari and Hampton is above him. However, I had one tell me if I was a cold weather team, I wouldn't be disappointed if I got Omarion in place of Genty, just because I think his game and style probably fits a little better in an outdoor cold weather city. But so again, I apologize. Don't send opinions. They won't get through, especially after today. I'll make sure they don't. But um, that wasn't Hondo opinion. That was NFL opinion there, Adrian. Next comes to us. Hi, Hondo. This is Alessandro C. from Italy. I have a question. When do you expect the Raiders to make a decision on AOC? Do you have some insight about what Brady's opinion is about him? Well, he's under contract, so there's no rush to make a decision on him. Could they trade him? Yes. Could they keep him around because he is a cheap addition to the staff? I mean, to the roster, and let him see how he does competing? Yes. And that's kind of what I expect. Unless somebody makes a very interesting offer, I would expect nothing to happen with him until cut down day. And I still think pretty good that he's going to make the team. Next one from Christy B. Hondo, absolutely love your interview with Adam Butler. It has been so awesome to meet the players who come on your podcast. I don't see that on others, and I love it. What do you think happens with Adam and the Raiders? I do think that he and the Raiders will make a deal. I know this. I know the Raiders want him back, talking about in the locker room, in the coaching staff. Clearly, it's John Spytek's option. If the Raiders try to lowball him and he gets to free agency, I would be shocked if he gets back. But if the Raiders make a fair offer, I know he wants to be here, and I don't think he has any desire to go shop the Raiders. I don't think that's him at all. So I would think he would be back. But we're going to learn a lot about John Spytek. And quite frankly, John's not going to really do anything without Tom Brady's blessing. So we're going to learn a lot about Tom. But I know this, if there was a vote in the locker room and a vote on, if you asked Robbie Leonard, if you'd asked Patrick Graham, I'm certain they'd all say, we need Adam Butler back. So I would think that he's going to be back. And I know he wants to. That is the desire of his heart. The next comes up some Isaac G. Hondo, you tell us a lot about what others report and think, but rarely tell us your thoughts. I respect that, but I also respect your opinions when I hear what players and others think of your opinions. Could you give me your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, and Matthew Stafford? Isaac G. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. And since you asked, I will tell you. I laugh because one of the things that we do at SI is now we're not going to just say somebody from Timbuktu or somebody who's not a professional at this, but when legitimate news sources, whether it's Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissaro, Ian Rappaport, if one of those people has an interesting opinion, we will report it because we want to be the place where you go to get all of your Raider information. And even though right in my social media bio, it says a retweet or a tweet doesn't mean an endorsement, you'd be shocked at just some of the pure filth I get from people. I'm going to read you a couple in a minute. But that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. If people can't read, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But it doesn't mean that we agree. Just means, hey, here's a report. This is what somebody thinks. So let me give you my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron is a really good quarterback. I think he has a very short window, an extremely short window. Now, we know that Pete Carroll has a 3-year deal. We know there's a lot of talent on this team. So perhaps the Raiders are like, listen, let's go draft a quarterback and sign a free agent like him to nurture and to bring along and mentor, which we saw him do with Zach Wilson, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. If that's what Tom Brady thinks, it doesn't really matter what Hondo Carpenter thinks. I'm going to cede any quarterback opinion to Tom Brady until Tom Brady proves he doesn't know quarterbacks. My initial reaction to that is I don't particularly like it because I think the Raiders have done a lot trying to do bridges. I can tell you that when John Gruden was here, John Gruden really believed that Derek Carr could get him over the top. I can also tell you that when Josh McDaniel, Yeah, when Josh McDaniels got here, Josh believed that Derek Carr could get him over the top. Okay. Um, I do not believe that was the sentiments of everyone within the organization. I don't. I know for a fact it wasn't. And so, whether Derek was a legit who could or a bridge, either one, the Raiders have not had a guy that everybody knew was the answer in a long, long time. I think the longer they keep piecemealing that it just keeps staving off getting to some stability in the franchise. Now, let me just say something to you so nobody thinks Hondo's being a hack. If Tom Brady comes out and says, no, I think Aaron's our guy for 2 years, we want to have Aaron and all of that, then I'm going to totally change my opinion because I I totally trust Tom Brady when it comes to quarterbacks more than Hondo Carpenter. But for me, you look at the fact he doesn't like to do the OTAs, he doesn't like to do the mini camps, and you got to be there. You're installing new systems, you're going to be setting the standard. He's also not cheap. So for me, I just don't see that as a super big fit with the Raiders. But again, if Tom Brady does, who cares what I think? I don't even care what I think if that's what Tom Brady thinks because he's earned that right. Now, if Tom Brady proves to be a failure at judging other quarterbacks, then I'll won't give him that. But for now, I do, and I would stay there. Sam Darnold is intriguing to me on a couple of different levels. He has not done well until he got to Minnesota. So that then tells me is it, and it was 1 year. And I've seen people say, well, sign him into a 20 million deal, $1 million deal, incentive laden. Okay, you can say that, but he's not going to sign for that. Somebody's going to give him the big jack. So people can say, oh, you just do this. And you got to understand he's got to agree to it too. And he's not. He's going to get, I told you guys, go back and watch the podcast at the owners' meeting. He is going to get 40 mil a year, right in that range from somebody. When you look at all of his years of no success with 1 year of success, 40 million is a lot. And you're going to probably have to commit, I would think, a minimum of 3 years, 120 million. And if you're guaranteeing 120 million for 3 years, you're marrying to somebody with, to me, that's a huge risk. Now, again, if Tom Brady says no, then you know what? Okay. And I'm not saying that I would not have made that comment with other people in the past. So I'm not kissing Tom Brady's rear. I'm just giving him the respect he's earned. The respect, if Tom Telesco had said it, and I like Tom Telesco a lot. If Tom Telesco signed Darnold to a 3-year, $120 million guaranteed deal, I'd be critical of it and say he owns the deal. Just like when Ziegler and McDaniels signed Garoppolo, I said, I totally disagree with this, but they're the ones that are going to be judged. He failed and they got judged. Brady, I'm going to give a little bit different segue there. So to me, with Darnold, the cost doesn't out the return. I always look at stuff ROI, return on investment. There's too much of a failure gamble to put $120 million and put 40 million of your team's cap space for 3 years. It just, to me, it's too much. But if Tom Brady says so, I think you go with it. Matthew Stafford, different story. And I'll tell you why. Matthew Stafford's going to be at every OTA, every mini camp. For the interest of full disclosure, I covered Matthew, and I know exactly what he's like in the locker room. I know exactly what he's going to be like mentoring an Aiden O'Connell, mentoring a rookie, all that kind of stuff. He is still playing very well and has done so consistently. Had a great year last year. A lot of weapons on the Raiders. So you go get Matthew Stafford and you get him for 2 years, 80 million. Now you're only putting 2 years there, and he's a guy that's still playing at a high level who you know what he's going to bring. Of those three guys, I am much more palatable with Matthew. However, And let me make this clear, because Tom Brady doesn't want to, and he's talked about it, play a young guy. And then that means you're either agreeing that Matthew's going to be your starter, or you're going to develop Aiden, and Aiden is going to start, and then you develop the rookie. Again, to me, Matthew makes the most sense, but that's if you go the rookie route and don't go make a trade. Now, a lot of people, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, aren't talking about trade. The next one, Hondo, with all that is going on, do you now see Maxx coming back or not? This is from Curtis S. I do. I do believe a deal will get done and Maxx will be back. This is where he wants to be. He's never hidden that. I think the Raiders have shown him a lot. And I think the Raiders are going to continue to show him a lot. Leave it there. Next one, Hondo, what do you think of the potential of a Zach Wilson addition to the Raiders? This is a guy that has shown some flashes, although I think we all can agree is underachieved. But with Pete Carroll, what do you think? Okay, this comes from Michael M. I'm not against that. You still go get a rookie. You still have Aiden O'Connell. If Pete Carroll looks at him and Chip Kelly look at him and say, you know what, we think we can work with him, I'm okay with that. He's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than a Sam Darnold or a Matthew Stafford. You still have to have him compete. There's no guarantee like when you go get a Matthew Stafford. But I'm not against a Zach Wilson if the price is right. Listen, I think the Raiders with Chip Kelly, I think the Raiders with Pete Carroll, and Tom Brady picking a quarterback, they deserve a lot of leeway. Not against that at all, Michael. I think that's a very interesting one. Hondo, you've talked a lot about hearing that the Raiders may make a trade. I have. I'm just curious. If you were the Raiders and you could trade for a quarterback, realistically, we know Joe Burrow's not getting traded, Josh Allen's Patrick Mahomes. But if you could make a realistic trade for someone, who would you like to see the Raiders make a trade for? JJ McCarthy. That's who I'd like to see him make a trade for. I think he would be a great addition to the Raiders. But again, price has to be right. Hondo, I love your interviews with executives, players, and coaches, and it's hilarious to just watch you having them on. I don't know why it's hilarious, but thank you. When you give your updates, how do you weigh people telling you a story or leaving details out? This is from S. Kennedy. Great question. So here's a couple things that I do. I won't ask. So let me think here for a minute. Let's use the Commanders last year. Yeah, I have connections in the Commanders. And I was told by a connection in the Commanders they were not going to trade their pick to the Raiders. This person told me that when the Raiders called about trading for the pick, they made it clear to the Raiders that they weren't going to trade the pick. And this person would have absolute direct knowledge if the Raiders called or not. That's why when people reported that the Raiders never called, I literally laughed because people at the Commanders told me they did, and people at the Raiders told me they did. I believed them. Now, I'm close to them. I have a personal relationship with them. So I had no problem taking that information. All right. But if the Raiders were in direct competition with them for a quarterback, I wouldn't ask them what they were going to do. I don't put people in a position where they can't be 100% truthful with me. Now, there's a lot I don't tell you. So let me give you an example. I knew last year there were two players that the Commanders wanted. They wanted Jaden Daniels. That was who they wanted. That's why they weren't even interested in trying to trade up. They thought Jaden Daniels would go to them. Okay, they felt confident about it. But there were 2 guys they were willing to take, not more than that. I never reported that. That would have been unfair to them. But I knew that Jaden Daniels was their number 1. So I weigh that. Number 2 is I weigh the length of the relationship. How long have I known people? What have I given them? Have I given them stuff and been helpful to them so they're appreciative? Are they friends? I'll give you an example. There's an NFL executive that him and his wife and my wife and I, we like to go do things together, take little mini trips or whatever. We're going to do one, in fact, um, again this off season. And I'm very close to this person. I've been to their family weddings. They're part of my life. We have a great relationship outside of football. So when I ask them things, they'll say, this is kind of what we're thinking. And hey, or I'll say, am I allowed to report X, Y, and Z, or can I report it just as opinion? I talk about those things. It's like any other friendship. You have friends and people that tell you things that you would never repeat, and then some that it's okay. So that's kind of how I measure that out. But I don't ever put people in a position. So let me give you an example. Years ago, when Tim Tebow was coming out of college, I had a very, very good friend, still is a very, very good friend, who's part of the Bronco organization that told me, we're getting Tim Tebow. We think that he is a tier one quarterback. Now, what is the definition of a tier one quarterback? A guy that can get you to the playoffs and win games in the playoffs. Guess what? A lot of people forget Tim Tebow did that. Now he's not in the league. He wasn't. He got out of the league quick because he just brought so much media attention that it almost overshadowed the team. But a lot of people downplay Tim Tebow, and the guy won playoff games. So having said that, I knew Denver was going to take Tim Tebow. Okay, now I never wrote that as a definitive, but when I did my final mock draft, I had him going to Denver in the first round. Many of you will remember this because my mock draft got laughed at by Mike and Mike at the time on ESPN, Mike Golick and Mike Greenberg. And after the draft, I got my accolades because I was the only one that had it right. So it's just I'm careful how I write it. Um, sometimes there are things that I know to be factual. I just simply present as opinion because they are my opinion, but it's my opinion based on information. But that's why I'm just super careful. If I have somebody that's not a source, if I have somebody that um, I don't have a personal relationship with, it's just a business one, I probably wouldn't call them. And then I tell them right up front, hey, I want to ask you about this. If I'm not allowed to report anything, I won't. I can just use it as background. So let me give you another one. Um, I'm not going to tell you what draft, but there was a draft where every mock I did for the Raiders, there was a player that everybody thought the Raiders were going to get. And I had been told by someone higher up the draft board than the Raiders, we're taking that guy. And they even had told me that the Raiders had contacted them about trading. And they said, that's the guy we want. We're not coming out of this draft without him. The Raiders aren't getting him. And I knew who the people ahead of them were taking. So I never mocked this person. And I had people say, Alejandro doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the guy the Raiders want. Everybody has the Raiders getting this guy. But I knew another team had them or him already marked. So again, I just let it go. But that's how I weigh it. And, there are some people in this draft that I know. So, for example, in my mock draft the other day, I had the Raiders at trading down to 12 and getting Ashton Genty. Now, this is a guy that many believe is a absolute stud running back, the best running back in the draft. I'm told the best running back in a while. But when you look at the teams between 6 and 12, none of them have a running back need. So I could see Genty falling to 12, although I would have zero issues with the Raiders taking him at 3. I think he's that good. And then you've got him for 5 years. You got him on a 5-year deal. So again, do I think other teams could move up to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and take him? Sure do. Absolutely, I do. But that's a risk you take. So that's how I weigh it. And that's a really, really good question. Uh, S. Kennedy, thank you so much. And then the last one comes to us from John T. Hondo, how do you think Pete Carroll hire ranks among the other head coaches in this cycle? This is a great question. Now, John, I am going to get into a ton of detail on this coming up on Sunday's podcast. So please, in fact, the entirety of Sunday's podcast is probably going to be looking at the 7 coaching hires in detail. And I'm pretty critical of them. I don't think that the NFL had a great hiring cycle. I think there was a couple of really good hires. I think there were a couple of interesting hires, and I think there were a couple of terrible hires. So I'm not going to get into a bunch of detail about where it ranks. I'm just going to say this. You get a Hall of Fame coacher, and the only negative you hear about Pete Carroll is his age. But how many coaches are here for 5 years anyways? Number 1. Number 2, this is a man that acts, performs, and behaves much younger than his age. So I'm not worried about the age. I'm just not. It literally means nothing to me. So you get a Hall of Fame coach with a proven track record. You've got 2 awesome coordinators. You keep a Joe Philbin, you keep a Robbie Leonard, and you fill. I mean, you go get Devlin McCullough out of Notre Dame, which is an underrated hire, and you got a really, really good staff here. I gave Pete Carroll an A plus, and not because he's a Raider. I would have given Pete Carroll an A plus, depending on his coordinators. Uh, with Dallas, I would have given Pete Carroll pretty much everywhere other than the Jets an A plus, um, depending on his coordinators. I just think it was a tremendous hire. I told you ever since I started covering this team 6 years ago, the Raiders is not a job where you go and learn how to uh, be a head coach. So you get a proven Hall of Fame guy, proven credentials, proven winner, proven developer of talent, proven staff builder. This is a no-brainer. I thought it was the best hire in the NFL cycle. But again, please check out Sunday's podcast. I think you'll really enjoy it. Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us today from all of us to all of you. God bless you richly. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you again here tomorrow. Don't forget, next week coming up, it's going to be so good from the combine. So, from Shannon, Dexter, I, and all of us on your On SI team, thanks for being with us. God bless you all.